They found the ledger between two dead stars. The salvaged ship Marta drifted slow and careful. Its lights cut thin paths through black. Metal ribs of the derelict lay like bones. The crew moved like ghosts. They had seen old ships before. They had not seen a ledger. It looked small at first. A flat box, wrapped in fabric that had lost its color. When the architect, Lena, opened it, dust sighed out like a tired breath. Her gloved fingers shook a little. The pages inside were thin and soft, not paper as humans use it, but a kind of pressed fiber that held ink like a memory. Symbols ran down each line. Names, dates, short marks that meant favors and promises. The light from the Marta trembled across them. They read, names from 3 empires, names from trading houses, names no one in that part of the galaxy had heard in 1,000 years. The ledger had neat columns. What was taken, what would be returned, and how the return should be done. It had stamps and seals stamped long ago. Most of the entries ended in a thin, dry hand. One entry was different. The last line of the ledger felt new. Its ink still smelled faintly of oil. Its letters were bold and fresh. The signature at the end was human. Lena did not shout. She sat silent, the words swimming in her vision. The ship hummed with machines that could not care. The crew looked at one another and then at the page. The captain, Merrick, felt cold move up his spine. He had rescued many things from the dark. He had never rescued a promise. Back in other systems, monitors woke. Old networks stirred when the Marta's beacon sent a routine salvage report. Signals that had lain quiet answered. Ancient protocols checked their lists. The ledger's code whispered through long-forgotten channels, and where it landed, alarms lit. On a council world far from human space, robes rustled in a quiet dome. The eldest of a ruling house read the same ledger projection the Marta saw. Hands that had signed treaties with teeth of steel folded. The projection highlighted the last line, the human name. The elder's mouth tightened. He remembered a war that his history books tried to smooth like a scar. He remembered ships taken as if they were nothing, and shelters burned as if dust could be erased. No one keeps the old promises when it suits them, he told the room. But his voice was thin. Around him, a younger voice argued that old deals bound new rulers. Men and aliens who cared for law and those who cared for gold argued until the dome hummed with different truths. On a cold research post at the edge of human space, a scholar named Isha received a curious packet. It had come from a machine that listened to the dark. Isha had spent years decoding broken signals. She had fed old myths into new logic. When her terminal displayed the ledger, she cried out softly. Her whole life had been a search for a line that connected their small, crowded planet to the wide and indifferent galaxy. The ledger's last line was that line. The Marta left the derelict. Its belly carried more than scrap metal now. It carried a truth that could not be folded away. Merrick argued with his crew about what to do. Turn the ledger over to the nearest authority? Sell it to the highest bidder? Hide it and hope the galaxy forgot? Lena said nothing. She only pressed a band of clean fiber to one page and watched the ink smear a little on her glove. The mark made her feel linked to whoever had written that line. Someone had asked a favor. Someone had been promised a return. They chose to send a copy. The copy traveled faster than the Marta. It rode in tiny packets across old trading lanes and through private channels. It landed on many screens. Each screen carried a new reaction. Some systems blinked and slept again. Others woke like a fire feeding on air. Small ships changed their course. Ambassadors sat up. Merchants closed their ledgers. In a distant arm of space where rusted warships slept like old gods, a signal tripped a switch no one had touched in generations. An engine that had been cold for centuries coughed. The hull of that godship flexed like an animal, returned to awareness. Its name was carved in forgotten language, and its guns were remembered in nightmares. The ship moved. Across the star-strewn distance, the Marta's crew watched a map on their screen. Tiny dots burned and then grew. They saw the ripple they had set. Marek's hands tightened on the console. Lena cried quietly. Isha, reading the ledger in her small room, understood that the ledger did not only bind the great. It bound the small. It named those who owed and those who were owed. No one on the Marta wanted war. They wanted their share of credit and a safe life. But no one can pull a name out of a book and not expect the world to notice. The ledger had been a secret of the old galaxy, kept where time tangled and memories slept. The human name on the last line was a key. It opened doors and alarms, hopes and wants. As the salvage lights of the MARTA faded into black, an ancient warship far away took a slow, terrible breath. Its engines woke and ran through checks, ancient code whispering in its nerves. Somewhere in the deep, a captain who had signed a line decades ago read a printed copy passed down in a cloak and felt a promise return like a tide. On the MARTA, Lena closed the ledger and wrapped it again. She did not sleep. She sat with the box cradled like a child. Outside, stars blinked like eyes. Somewhere very far away, a ship that had not answered to anyone smaller than a moon began to listen. They said promises were for the weak. The humans kept them anyway. Months after the MARTA sent its copy, small lights blinked in hidden yards on a crowded world. Old machines woke. Hunched engineers in oil-streaked overalls moved with careful hands. They did not call themselves makers. They called themselves fixers, people who could take broken things and make them useful again. In a narrow dock beneath a city of tangled pipes, they rebuilt a ship from pieces no one else wanted. The craft looked like a shadow stitched together. Its hull was scrap metal and patched tiles. Its engine used old comet iron and scavenged amplifiers. No one expected it to fly far. Yet the ship had one thing no great yard had. A map, not a map of stars, but a map of bones, markers old as treaties, hidden beacons that could lead a small runner straight to the ledger's first resting place. The map came from Isha. She had read the ledger and found marks no one else saw. She had sent them in secret to Merrick. Merrick had given them to the fixers. Lena watched the MARTA's galley as hands bolted plates and rewired a crooked power core. She felt both pride and fear. The runner was small enough to hide in meteor dust. It had no heavy guns. Its weapons were tricks, decoys, noisemakers, and a single long-range lure that could sing to old signals. The crew that would fly it were not soldiers. They were people like Isha and Merrick and Lena, stubborn and clever and tired of being small. When the engine first fired, it made a sound like a throat clearing. The fixers held their breath. The engine answered. It held, then it sang a slow tone that the old networks heard. The signal was quiet and full of purpose. It said, "We go to keep a promise." Across many systems, that small tone did what a king's decree could not. Fleet captains looked up from their cups. Trade houses frowned at their ledgers. A group of merchants who owed favors exchanged messages and then shut their offices. The old empires that had signed the ledger remembered the lines as if they were dust on their tongues. Some called the human engine a foolish trick. Others counted the move as a provocation. A council that had once kept watch over such promises sent a handful of vessels. They were not the great god ships yet. They were older patrols with clean names and sharp orders. Their commanders believed law mattered. They wanted to see if humans would obey the forms of repayment or break them. If humans broke the forms, the council would act. Marek's crew left at dawn. The runner slipped from the dock like a breath. Its camouflage tasted of iron and ash. Isha watched the engine read the secret marks and smiled once, small and strange. She had dreamed of being part of a story larger than her lab. Now she rode in the belly of it. The long lanes of shipping are full of eyes. The runner chose a path that no one used much, a river of comet dust that could hide its heat. Patrol scanned. A small interceptor found them near a flock of abandoned satellites. The runner threw out a false trail, a ribbon of light that melted into the comet dust. The interceptor chased the ribbon. Merrick watched the small dot on the screen and felt the old rush of a man who knows how to use a storm. They reached the outer marker by night. The marker was a circle of dead beacons that hummed with a memory. It was one of those places where treaties kept their breath. The runner slipped inside, and Isha's hand shook as she read the map by the light of a console. The stone marks matched the ledger. They had found the right place. They should have been alone. But the ledger never belonged to one kind of fear. The marker's silence was not empty. It was waiting. A small ship came out of the dark like a claw. It wore no flag the humans could read. It broadcast only one thing, the history of traps. The ship's design was old and ceremonial. Its commander's message was clear. Visitors here answer not with words, but with the cost of entry. The runner's crew had hoped to bargain. They had hoped to show the ledger and be believed by the small guardians who kept such places. Instead, they met a blade. Merrick tried to open a channel. The other ship answered with a recorded chant from an age when promises were enforced by loss. The recording spoke of those who took without returning and of punishments carved deep. Isha felt sick. She had thought the ledger would call forth friends. It called forth memory, and memory has teeth. The smaller ship did not fire at once. It wanted to see method and measure. It wanted proof that the humans came with law and honor, not with theft. Merrick remembered the old protocols he had learned under better commanders. He held the ledger's copy to his console and sent its code in a slow, honest stream. He told the small ship who they were, what they sought, and how the ledger bound them. His voice shook. The other ship responded by dropping a pattern into space. An old test. It pressed a lattice of sensors that reached for the runner's hull like iron fingers. The runner coughed under the test. Alarm sounded. Lena worked the panels and shut down systems the other ship wanted to scan. Isha pushed a packet of data into the lattice, a fragment of the ledger that a human hand had copied by candlelight and then buried in code. She hoped that knowledge would be enough. For a breath, the test stopped. The small ship read the data and turned its dish like a head. Its lights blinked, slow and careful. It transmitted one word in a language Isha had only seen in museum glass. Witness. The runner crew breathed. They thought the test ended. They were wrong. From the far edge of the marker, other dots began to shine. Not all were ships. Some were anchors left by those who wanted to remember and those who wanted to catch fools. The dots stitched a net. The runner had found a place where history had tied its lines tight. The crew saw the net widen, and they understood the danger. Merrick closed his eyes for a second and felt the ledger's weight in his pocket. He had come to keep a promise, but the galaxy remembered promises in its own way. He could turn back, sell the knowledge, hide it. The crew looked at one another. Isha's face was pale and set. Lena's hands did not tremble now. They chose to move forward. The runner slipped deeper into the ring, engines low and steady. It carried no big guns, but it carried a map and a stubborn heart. Outside, the net glittered like a warning. Somewhere beyond that glitter, great engines woke and old laws turned their pages. The runner crossed the inner line and found a shadow that had waited for centuries. The trap had teeth. The next moment would decide whether the humans would be remembered as keepers or as prey. The marker waited like a closed mouth. The runner slipped through the ring of dead beacons. Stones and metal hung in slow orbits. Light moved in thin bands. Inside the ring, air did not matter. Memory did. The crew felt like a pressure that sat on the hull. Isha read the map by a glow on her screen. Her fingers moved over old marks. Each mark fit a page of the ledger. The map was not about trade routes. It showed places where life had been taken. It showed shelters burned, fields emptied, cities cut down when empires took what they wanted. The ledger had names for these things. It wrote them in blunt lines. Who took, who saved, and who must return. Lena watched the projection and felt the hair on her arms lift. The archive they found in the marker was a memory stone. When the runner sensor sang to it, the stone opened like an eye. Light spilled out and drew scenes in the air. Figures moved in slow holograms. Ships stole water from a planet. Machines packed children into crates. A council signed a paper, and a fire swallowed a valley. The images were not gentle. They were honest. The archive did not judge in words. It showed. Faces of many species blinked in the light. Some faces were grateful. Some were empty. The ledger that followed the images read like a ledger of losses. It recorded not money but shelter, not goods but lives. The debt the ledger named was not about coin. It was about righting wrongs. Merrick held the copy of the ledger in his hand. The pages felt thin under his gloves. He watched the holograms and felt his stomach turn. "We did not know," he said aloud. He meant humans. He meant himself. But the archive was older than the first human city. It showed many hands taking and many hands failing to return. A low signal pulsed from the ring. It was old and polite and full of demand. The patrol that had chased him earlier had sent a request. It wanted proof of intent. It wanted to know if the humans came to take more, or to make good on what had been taken centuries ago. Merrick opened a channel. He showed the patrol scans and the archive. He explained the ledger and the map. He said simply, "We came to repay." The transmission carried no weapons. It carried history and a human voice that tried to be honest. For a long moment, nothing answered but the archive. Then a reply came, not in words but in ceremony. The patrol sent an old test pattern. It was a lattice of light that probed the runner's hull and its code. The pattern asked, "Do you carry a truth that you will protect? Or do you carry a lie that will break us?" Lena worked at the panel. Dust and sweat made her hands steady. She folded parts of the ledger into secure packets. Isha fed portions of the archive into the test lattice, pieces of memory that matched the stone's projection. She sent videos of returned artifacts, lists of names they had found and wanted to find, plans to rebuild what was lost. She did not lie. She had no right to. The pattern read the data and paused. For a breath. The crew thought the test would end in peace. It did not. From the dark between the beacons, other lights blinked. Not all were patrols. So were anchors. Some were traps left by those who had enforced promises with teeth. The net widened around the runner, like a spoke of cold wires. An alien enforcer came near. Its hull was smooth and angry. Its commander's voice had a taste of old law. "Return the ledger," the voice said. "Leave this place. The debts you claim are dangerous." The tone held a memory of hurt and of punishment. Merrick answered with the ledger open. He told the truth he had learned. He said humans were named as keepers in that old line. He said they had come to repay in ways the ledger asked, by rebuilding shelter, returning children's names, and restoring places taken long ago. He spoke of gardens they could plant, of water they could return, of histories they could restore. The enforcer did not reply with words. It replied with laser lines that cut near the beacons. The first shot did not strike the runner. It hit a satellite of memory and silenced its light. The archive wept a thin thread of image and then burned away. Isha swore under her breath. She had not thought the Guardians would attack so fast. The skirmish began small and sharp. The runner threw out decoys. It sang the old lure and hid in dust. Small drones burst from the enforcer and tried to catch the runner's tail. Lena jammed and rerouted. Merrick steered with hands that had steadied through worse storms. Their goal was not to kill. They did not have the weapons for that. Their plan was to break the net. Their tools were noise, sudden movement, and proof. In the middle of the fight, Isha did something that made everyone hold their breath. She took the archive and fed it into a broadcast that could slip past the enforcer's strict eyes. The broadcast was small and simple. It was a record of faces and names, images of people who had been taken, and the places the ledger named as lost. It was a plea more than proof. She sent it to every listening channel she could find. She sent it back to Earth. She sent it to any system that might still remember mercy. The signal raced along old lanes. It hit quiet stations and woke them. It touched networks that could not ignore pictures of children under dust, and fields turned back to green. The enforcer's sensors twitched. Machines made to hold the past began to ask new questions. In a few places, the broadcast landed in hands that had some power to speak. In other places, it landed in simple markets and kitchens. People watched. On the runner, the net tightened. A drone clipped a wing. Sparks flew like small stars. The hull groaned. Merrick felt his chest tighten. He thought of the ledger in his pocket and of the promise that lay written there. He thought of what repair might mean. Then, on Isha's console, two words flashed in a language both plain and heavy. They were the two words that changed the angle of every eye that could read them. They read, "We remember." It was not a claim of guilt. It was not a threat. It was a promise. Those two words moved through space like a bell. They made some ships lower their shields. They made some commanders close their fists. They made some people who had been taken long ago lift their faces and cry. The runner skimmed past a dying memory satellite. It punched through the inner ring and found a deep vault hidden under a stone. Inside, carved into metal older than most empires, lay a list of names. Many names were gone. Some lived in silence. The ledger's line for humans was there, bright now because it had been read. The trap had teeth, but it had also teeth of truth. Outside, engines far away turned. The galaxy had begun to wake in a different way. The trap had been meant to stop small thieves. Instead, it had opened a door to a memory that would not be buried. The runner had not won. It had not lost. It had found a truth that would demand a new kind of answer. News of the ledger spread, like wind over dry grass. Once it touched a place, people could not pretend it had not been. Some said the ledger was old paper and dust. Others said it was law. Many said it was both. The galaxy split into voices that argued and hands that reached for tools. The humans had started with one small promise. Now whole systems chose to answer. At the outer edge of the marked world, a city-sized recycler creaked awake. It had been a ruin for generations. Its machines were a tangle of rust and memory. Humans and small allied species worked together, hands and tools and rough laughter filling the air. The recycler was not a weapon. It was a builder. It took old scrap, melted it, and shaped it into shelter and pipes and water tanks. Where a plaza had been a field of broken glass, new beams rose steady and honest. The first shelter they finished held a family that had once lived in a cave under a red moon. The family stood and touched walls that were warm. They cried little, quiet tears that the workers cleaned with rough palms. For the people who saw it, the work was proof that the ledger meant more than threat. It meant return. Not everyone believed proof. In a black platform above the recycler, a commander of an old empire watched flickering holos of the rebuilt plaza. He closed his eyes. His house had signed the ledger long ago, but signing had been done by men who had forgotten faces. Now his grandchildren asked questions that refused to leave the room. He felt the ledger like a weight on his chest. His house had a choice: follow the old line and help, or stand with pride and with guns. Pride answered with guns. A patrol of ceremonial ships slid into orbit near the recycler. They were clean, cold things with histories of punishment. Their commander spoke of balance and law, but their actions were sharp and fast. They demanded the recyclers shut down and the humans hand over the ledger and any records. The workers answered with old papers and new voices. They called on witnesses, small species whose names had been reclaimed, and on merchants who had traded for years with the people the ledger named. The first clash was not loud. It was close and cruel. Drones cut power lines that fed the recyclers' furnaces. A water tower bled into the street. People ran with buckets and shouted orders to keep children safe. The humans and allies did what they could. They did not have many guns. Their strength was in numbers and stubbornness, and in the stories they could show to the cameras the elders still trusted. The flagship that slept for ages had not yet moved, but smaller ships were enough to test courage. The recyclers' heat dimmed. Workers fought in the dust with chains and makeshift shields. Lena and Merrick stood on the ledge of a shipping crane, tall among the chaos. Merrick barked orders. Lena rerouted power with fingers that did not stop shaking. Isha ran between repair crews, bringing parts and words that calmed panic into work. In the middle of the fight, a beloved human ship arrived. It was called the Haven. The Haven was old and slow, but it carried seeds and tools and a crew who had once farmed on a small blue world. When the Haven dropped into the sky, people cheered. Its crew used long-range beams to push away a drone cluster. For a moment, relief spread like bread. Then a messenger from a distant council arrived in the comms. It said a godship had begun to move. Its ancient engines had answered the ledger's echo. The message was short and plain. A flagship from a house that had once looted whole moons was waking. It moved slow now, but it would not be stopped by a small crowd. The Haven did not wait for the godship. It stayed. When a squad of patrol fighters dove toward a line of children hiding in a ruined theater, the Haven put itself between the fighters and the ground. Its hull took the first fire. Explosions ripped through its deck. People on the ground screamed and ran. The Haven's signal faltered. Merrick grabbed a handhold and watched the ship burn like a lamp smashed on stone. The loss hit the workers like a storm. Isha fell to her knees and pressed her forehead to the dirt. Lena screamed with a sound that cut the air. The patrols closed in, expecting the end. They thought fear would break the people. It did not. If anything, the Haven's fall did something the patrols did not intend. Its crew had, before they were gone, pushed the ledger's images across the open net. The broadcast showed the faces of families, the list of names, and the recyclers' first new shelter. It showed the Haven's crew smiling as they planted a seed. Viewers across systems watched. Hands that had signed the ledger felt shame, and then action. Small ships changed course. Merchants who owed favors sent supplies. Minor houses sent patrols that took different orders. To protect the builders, not to destroy them. In the council dome of an empire that still remembered the ledger's law, a young voice rose and said, "We cannot keep promises written in blood." The old commander, who wanted guns, looked out at the hollow of children playing under new beams. He set his cup down and left the room. The battlefield did not end at a single victory. The patrols that had come to punish pulled back when they saw unexpected banners in the sky. Flags of small allies, sigils of merchant houses, and a simple symbol the workers had painted on the recycler's wall. People who had never met the humans or their allies began to speak the same name. It was not a war cry. It was a call for help. Above them all, the engine of the godship turned. It had read the ledger and the sound the broadcast made. Its course was long, but steady. Systems that had traded silence for safety suddenly found their silence uncomfortable. The galaxy began to choose sides. Merrick stood on the ruined plaza as the night cooled. He looked at the shelter the workers had built. He remembered the haven and the seeds that now lay in warm soil. He felt grief like a weather he could not change. But grief was not a reason to stop. It was a reason to move forward. The last scene of the night was not a victory. It was a gathering. People lit small fires and placed names near the shelters. They read the ledger out loud, not as law or threat, but as a list of things to mend. When the fires burned low, the sky on the horizon burned brighter. A slow shape crossed a distant star and cut a path that threw long shadows. The godship arrived with every turret lit and a memory older than any treaty. The reckoning had reached its center. The next hour would decide what the ledger truly meant. They came to judge with fire. The humans came to answer with hands. The flagship filled the sky like a small moon. It moved slow and sure. Its name was older than many languages. Its guns shone like teeth. People on the ground stopped and watched as a shadow fell over the new shelters and the gardens that had just begun to grow. The godship expected fear. It expected the crowd to crumble. Merrick stood on a low rise and watched the great hull hang over the rebuilt plaza. He felt small. He felt the ledger in his pocket, like a hot stone. Around him, the people who had helped build the shelter, humans, traders, and small species neighbors, held each other in the tools they had used. They had no wish to fight a godship. They had a wish to finish a wall, to plant another seed, to return water to a river that had been taken. A loud voice came from the flagship. It spoke in an old tongue and in many others through translation. The captain of the godship read from a long record. He spoke of law and repayment and punishment. He accused quietly and with weight. The words were meant to end debate and bring fear. Merrick stepped forward. He had no right to speak to such a captain, but he did not step alone. Isha walked beside him, her hands stained with earth. Lena walked too, her palms still black with tools. Behind them were faces that had been healed by the recycler. A child who had found a toy again, an elder who had found her record names, a trader who had lost family and now stood with a load of food. Merrick shouted so the crowd could hear. He did not shout at the godship. He shouted at the idea the ship carried. "We do not want war," he said. "We want what the ledger asks, to return. We have rebuilt what we could. We have planted. We have given names back. We ask not for praise. We ask only to finish the work." The godship's captain read more. He read of debts that could never be paid. He spoke of balance measured in power. He spoke as if metal were the only language that mattered. The crowd listened. Some whispered fear. Some held hands tighter. Then Isha did the small thing that changed the sky. She took a simple projector and linked it to the broadcast that had shown faces and names across systems. She sent a gallery up, wide and bright, so everyone could see. The projector showed not treaties or threats. It showed what the humans had done. A ruined field turned to green, a house made warm, a list of names returned to a family that no one thought to ask about twice. It showed the Haven's crew planting seeds before the ship fell. It showed a child's small hand reaching for a cup of water. The images were plain. They were not weapons. They were not clever arguments. They were people in place and small proofs. The projector also showed the ledger itself, open to its last lines. Merrick read those lines aloud, so the voice of a small man could meet the voice of a great ship. Across the great hull, something shifted. The captain's hand moved. The godship did not fire. It did not need to. The message had reached an audience that had little taste for being witness to what it once did. On the flagship, younger officers and record keepers watched the broadcast that Isha shared. They did not all agree with fire. Some had family names written in the ledger, names that had been taken and then kept quiet for generations. They watched and felt the old weight. Outside the plaza, small ships answered the broadcast. Merchants who had once signed away favors sent water and parts and people with tools. Minor houses that had never been proud joined the line and offered supply routes. The galaxy is big, but news travels fast when it carries truth with it. On the godship, the captain closed a record. He had seen the pictures. He saw that the ledger was not a tool for power now. It was a list of wrongs that could be made right. He also saw that a single great ship could not hold every history, and that a hammer cannot fix every broken thing. He made a choice that surprised 100 small worlds. He ordered a lowering of the guns. He offered a small thing. A delegation would come down to the plaza, not with soldiers, but with builders. They would help where they had once taken. The offer was short and stiff, full of old pride, but it was an offer. Nobody cheered. The relief was quiet and slow and honest. People in the plaza let their shoulders drop. Merrick felt his breath come back into him. He watched as the delegation left the great hull and walked down the ramp. They wore clean armor, but they carried tools and lists. One of the delegation's youngest officers carried a small, faded photograph of a field he did not know how he had lost. He looked at it a long time before he handed it to an elder who had once lived on that land. The rebuilding did not stop at the plaza. It spread. The godship sent teams to repair wells and open the vaults that its house had taken. The ledger was placed in the plaza, not as a weapon but as a reminder. It was copied and shared and stored in many hands. The old law changed. It became not a sentence but a record to guide repair. There were hard conversations. Some houses refused to help. Some commanders wanted to turn guns back on. The galaxy is not a single mind. But the ledger had done what only few things could do. It had made history visible. Once history was visible, choices had to be made. Years later, the plaza would be remembered as a turning point. Children who had been small then grew up with stories of how strangers from different species learned to build together. Trade routes reopened with a new rule. When you take, you must give back. The ledger became a living book, its pages added by the ones who fixed what had been broken. Merrick returned to his ship with hands that ached pleasantly from work. Lena planted a tree with a neighbor. Isha took a map and went to teach others how to find the hidden markers and how to read the stones that held memory. The MARTA's lights shone over the plaza, sometimes as it came in for quiet repairs. At the end, the ledger's last line, the human name, was left blank, not because the dead had been erased. It had been answered in work and witness. The line was left blank because the promise had been kept, and because the future would write what came next. The galaxy did not tremble anymore from fear alone. It trembled with something new, the small hope that even great things could be changed by plain, steady hands.